Hello and welcome to this video on synthesis for A-level music technology. It's possibly one of the bigger, harder subjects, like individual parts of the music technology that we have to cover. So what you need to know is how subtractive synthesis works. There are several types of synth, frequency modulation, additive, subtractive, but subtractive is the main one that you'll find everywhere, and it's the one that you have to understand actually how it works, not to like a really extensive level, but at a basic level for your coursework mainly, because you need to create a composition, and also for the exam you need to be able to talk about certain elements that I will cover. This video might be quite long. I might split it up, actually. We'll find out. I'm trying to just do it comfortably on the fly. So synths, they all look different. I've got 3 software synths up here, all with drastically different looks. And that can be, I don't want to say confusing, but it can just be resistance to you sort of immediately going on. It can feel confusing. But once you start to look at them and start seeing the labels of things, you'll notice that there is a pattern in the terminology, and how they work, whilst they can sound very different to one another, is fundamentally the same. So this is a lesson on the theory behind subtractive synthesis and what you need to know for A-level music technology. So the basic premise of subtractive synthesis is to make what we say is a harmonically rich tone, a sound. It's not truly sound, because when it's inside the synthesizer, it's electricity or software or binary data, and once it comes out of speakers, we talk about that's when it's sound. But for the sake of ease, we'll talk about sound moving through the synthesizer, and also talking about control values and data, which is things that move through the synthesizer that just controls it. It doesn't make a sound on its own right. So the basic premise is that we try to make a harmonically rich sound, and then we use filters that you might have come across in EQ to remove or even boost some elements of that sound to sort of craft it into the shape we want, and then that's what we hear. So I'm going to draw that up in this box in here, on this Miro board, and what I'm trying to do is make things that are sound, wrong colour, green, and things that are, things that are going to be control data, they're going to be kind of that pinky red. So you can vision this. Can I duplicate that? Yes, I can. I like to think of it in a bit of a flow diagram. I'm going to put 3 up here. This one can be now. So, first step that we do. Grab that. Yeah, I wanted that one to be thin. Okay. We make the sound. Step 1, make a harmonically rich sound. And for that, we need or use oscillators. I've done this all really tiny. Big text. Okay. You'll find oscillators on all synths of their main types. Here we'll start looking for oscillators on these synths. This is a classic mini-moog layout. You'll see this a lot. Here are your oscillators. There are 3 of them. We have a waveform control, kind of a coarse tune control, and on 2 of the oscillators we have a fine tune control as well. So 3 of them added together. If you have more than one oscillator, you will always find a mixer where you can sort of blend the levels of the oscillators. Here we also have 3 on sliders, but the controls are the same. coarse and fine. We actually select the shape of these down here, but you can select the wave shape, and I will go into wave shape more. And over here we have two oscillators, OS1 and OS2, same sort of controls, right? We're seeing wave, we're seeing detune, which is kind of a fine tune, and a coarse tune as well. PW pulse width I will get into. So it's important that you can identify the core sounds in the core 4 tones an oscillator might make. They all sound different, and I've got a basic thing set up here for you to hear it. Oh, that's not it. That's this. Okay, let's get rid of these guys just in case they make noise. So you need to know the controls you'll find on an oscillator. So first one is going to be wave shape. Or wave or shape, you might see it labeled as. It's not always a dial. It's quite often on modern synths like a drop-down list, or even you don't have the control at the wave. You don't have a wave shape control, but you have different faders to turn up different wave shapes at different levels. So that's useless. Let's try that again. I have to pass, I think. Yeah, it's moved down. So shape number 1, the sine wave. This is the most basic sound. It's a pure single frequency, and I will play you a sine wave now. Hope you can hear that it's I hope you can hear it's a pure sound. It's clean. It's a little bit irritating, but I think the important thing to understand about the sine wave is that it only has one frequency in it, and that is what we call the fundamental. It's the frequency that we would identify as note. Can I clean that up? Straight line down? Yeah, straight line across. And I like to draw that sometimes. This becomes useful later, like this. So if you think of this as a graph with volume along the volume along here, and along here frequency, you can see how in this case we've got single frequency playing, and that's what we call the fundamental. It's the lowest and loudest frequency in the shape. Truthfully, you actually won't find sine waves in that many synths, especially not kind of older classic ones, because they've only got one shape. There's nothing that you can subtract. We'll talk about making a harmonically rich sound, then using filters to subtract elements, harmonics, or maybe boost harmonics. You can't really do that with a sine wave. The filter, all it will do is turn it up or down, or mute it if you go below it. So you actually don't find sine waves in classic style synths a lot. They've become popular in some extent as a kind of a bass tone, so you might find them now in more modern synths. But what you will find a lot of is the triangle wave. These things I'm drawing here, by the way, are the wave shape. In fact, perhaps I can show that on this reactor instrument I'm using. Where's all the blocks gone? Dear. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. We can use the utility scope. Perfect. I can actually plug this in, and you can see the shape of the sine wave. So I'm going to unmute that. Okay, just going to tune it all the way down so we can see the sine. Down below the level of human hearing, you can see the sine shape that was playing. Right. So next up is the triangle wave. The triangle wave is sonically quite similar to the sine wave, but it's got a few extra harmonics in it. So I can draw that too, like, sorry, my trackpad is in an awful place. I'll go down and across, and I like to kind of draw, this is simplified, right? There are more harmonics in this, but let's say like that, okay? It's got its fundamental, its loudest note, which will be the same as the sine, and then it's just got a few other harmonics added into it, there, and there, and it creates a slight edge to the sound. Right, let's play it to you. Here's a sine wave. Here it's not too dissimilar to the sine, but it's just got that slight edge and buzz to the top of it. If I just dial that all the way to the bottom again, like I did, so we can actually see the shape in the scope. There it is, triangles, beautiful, beautiful triangles. Right. Sound number, I'm going to run out of space. Sound number 3, the sawtooth wave. So if you keep adding harmonics to your triangle wave, you end up with a sawtooth wave, which is represented like this most. And a sawtooth wave, that's a rubbish line. A sawtooth wave has quite a lot of harmonics. Right. This auto-correcting is changing my diagram away from what I want. So it's going to have its strong fundamental, and it's going to have, let's stick some more in, especially, and they're kind of evenly spread, the harmonics in a sawtooth, and it creates a more aggressive, a more biting sound than a triangle. And sawtooths are used really commonly for the lead sounds in synths. Any sort of sawing lead or more aggressive sound, it's probably a saw. Let's have a listen to a saw. And you can see on the scope the saw shape. And I hope I don't have to explain why that's called a saw. You can also get reverse saws, which are kind of, they slope up the other way. They're just kind of a phase flip. If you've done phase yet, if you think about it, they kind of sound the same to me. But nice to have the option, especially if you blend the two together, can create some sort of regular saws and reverse saws. Crazy sounds. And lastly, the last shape we need to think about is the, I'm going to be correct, I'm going to call it a pulse. But it's often called square. Or to be more accurate, square is actually a type of pulse wave. Also got lots of harmonics. Hey, look at that. Also got lots of harmonics in it. These harmonics, kind of a bit more of a gap here, and it creates a bit of a hollow sound, but there's loads and loads of harmonics. You keep adding harmonics in, you'll hear the square wave. And I think the best way of describing square waves to my ears is it kind of sounds hollow. There's a lot of high harmonics, the fundamental's quite clear, and it's good for brass style synths and that sort of shape. And it kind of sounds hollow, so let me just play you some. Again, these are sounds that you actually do need to be able to identify by ear. So get on a basic synth, take the filter off it, and listen to the shapes. It's kind of also got that. It's kind of also got that old computer game style feel to it, square waves. I will quickly lower the pitch so you can see the scope. One square wave. So we've been talking about square waves. With a square wave, you will find an extra setting, an extra dial. You get with all of the other waves, sines, triangles, and saws, you find a pitch dial and a fine tune and a coarse tune pitch dial, where you can turn up and down the oscillator relative to the keyboard input you want. But with square, you'll also find, not quite often just labeled PW, it's called pulse width. Now that is because a square is actually a pulse wave with an even spacing between up and down. You'll see how a square wave is trying to be as loud as it can and as quiet as it can, as quickly as it can. It flips between the two. A pulse simply changes the ratios that these work at. So this here will be a narrow pulse. You see it's up for a shorter length of time than it's down, or a wider pulse. Ultimately, these things sound the same. The amount, sort of 10% sounds like 90%, and 20% sounds like 80%. I'll try and show you a pulse here. I'm going to plug that in there so I don't have to. Actually, no, we will listen to it. So unmute that. Is it right? Is it too low? Oh, I unplugged it. Right, plug that back up now. So that's square. And as we narrow the pulse, it becomes thinner, bitier, all the way to it's just like a little blip over and over and over again. Screw square will go the other way and get essentially the same sound going the other way. And in that way, square waves can become kind of a bit more aggressive. And of course, you know, we'll get into modulation later. We can change that throughout the note, which can make some really cool effects. So that's an oscillator. An oscillator you'll find normally more than one on every synth. When you have more than one, you would then have a mixer to blend them together. And the settings you'll find. So we're talking about wave shape. It's good to understand the amount of harmonics each wave has, and how we can adjust a pulse wave to change its sound. So once, I should say that the reason we find more than one oscillator is that the more oscillators have, the more harmonically rich, the more harmonics we can blend together in the sound, especially if you have two oscillators that are ever so slightly out of tune with each other. Excuse me. It's why you'll find a detuned dial or a fine-tuned dial all of the time, because if you have two saw waves playing exactly the same pitch, all you're doing is making that saw wave louder. You're not actually changing the sound, but slightly pitch them off away from each other. All of these harmonics shift as well, not just the fundamental, all of the harmonics shift up slightly with it, creating twice the harmonics, 3 times. Won't often find more than 3 oscillators on a synth. Like big modulators have like 6 modulators. Big modular synths have 6, but they are not particularly designed all for use at the same time. They're meant to have sort of like 3 doing one job and 3 doing another job. So you can create these really harmonically rich sounds by blending shapes, adding a square to a saw, a pulse to a saw, and detuning them, or having one octave lower, an octave higher. And what I'm just going to do on my synth. Now I'm building down here as I talk a modular synth. You don't necessarily have to know or be able to use modular synths, but I like them because every synth you see that isn't modular, anything like this, actually it's kind of modular, but it's just plugged in for you and you can't control those plugs. So oscillator will plug through mixer into the filter no matter what you do. With a modular synth, it's up to you to do that plugging in, and that's brilliant for understanding actually how they work. So I'm just going to quickly select a second oscillator, and I'm going to pitch them. I'm going to make saw waves. I'm going to connect the keyboard to that oscillator, and then I need a mixer like I was talking about. So that's a very simple mixer. So I can take my mixer and plug that into there. So I should have two. What have I done? Muted here. Saw wave 1. So that's the saw waves together. And now I'll make one slightly out of tune. You hear us just changing the sound. We'll make one square. But I'll keep it simple, so I'm just going to have slightly out of tune saw waves. Just create, like I was talking about, that really harmonically rich sound. Brilliant. So once we've mixed our sounds together, we need a filter, right? This is the subtractive part of subtractive synthesis. Our goal in it's the sort of the title part, you know, the reason subtractive synthesis is called subtractive is because of the filter. Now, I don't know whether I'm going to cut the video here yet, but I might just make it a marker. The filter section. I'll give it a title. We're going to be, where are we? So filters, I hope you've kind of already gone over EQs. They're very similar. We sometimes have slightly different terminology, but it's the same principle. You have three types of filters that you need to know about. A low pass filter, which will allow low frequencies to pass and it will cut the high frequencies. A high pass filter, which will do the opposite, it will cut low frequencies and allow high frequencies to pass through it unaffected. And then you get a band pass filter, which you don't often find in EQ, which will cut both high and low either side of your sort of cutoff value, which is control knob. So you're expected to see essentially 2, maybe 3 controls on a filter. You're going to have, I'm going to lift the circle, close enough. You're going to have circle, yeah. You're going to have cutoff, which is the frequency. I should type that properly. I'm so lazy. Sorry. Which is the frequency at which the filter starts working, either above or below the cutoff point, or at only the cutoff point if you're talking about bandpass. And you're going to have resonance, which we'll talk about in a bit. So once we've created our harmonically rich sound, I'll zoom in on this a bit more. Brilliant. Okay. We might have a sound scope. It looks a bit like this. Okay. So it's going to have the fundamental, and it's going to have lots and lots of harmonics. Don't correct that. Okay, let's go quieter. Loads and loads and loads of them. All the way up here, it's going to be tons of them, more than we can even see probably. I'll just have to draw in a certain amount. Our harmonics always get quieter as they go up the frequency, so this should be a perfectly kind of a good little slope. It's not, but you can imagine it. So we apply a high pass filter. And high pass filter will come along. It's often actually even looks like this on the synths. Like that. You often see that shape on synths, which, I'm sorry, I've been saying high pass, which is a low pass filter. Or you see that shape, which is a high pass filter, or sometimes you'll see that shape, that shape, which is a band pass filter. And actually this is a nice representation of what happens. So I've drawn on this shape onto my filter, and you'll see that these frequencies here will be cut out. You won't hear them anymore. And any frequency above this point, which is our cutoff point, will be reduced. The amount it's reduced by changes depending on the synthesizer, and in classic synthesizer days that was really important to the sound of that synthesizer. Now digitally you often find options and that slope is measured in decibels per octave. An octave is a doubling in frequency, so you'll find 6 dBs per octave, 12, sometimes 18, 24, and obviously that 24 is a really steep slope, cuts off a lot of frequencies as quickly as it can. 6 and 12 are more gentle slopes, and they're softer filters, and they're kind of better for pad work very often, and the harder slopes are good for sort of lead sounds and bass sounds on synths. And as this dial moves, as this moves up and down, we start to cut off more and more frequencies of our sound. You'll find that a low pass filter will do 90% of the work that you want. Most synths, classic synths especially, don't give you a high pass filter option, because who wants to cut out the fundamental, right? That's the note that tells you where it's at. I mean, it's quite cool sometimes, so please do experiment with it, but most of the work is done by low pass filters, which cut off some of the harmonics. And I hope I can just give you a bit of an idea on that. I'll find a filter in here somewhere. Filter. Okay. There's the cutoff dial, there's the resonance dial. I'll feed through there. So listen to how the sound changes. Remember, this is quite a harmonically rich double saw wave sound, and as I cut it off, listen to the high frequencies go, and you never know, we might be able to get to the point where we literally just leave the fundamental. We might find the point where we actually have a filter set like this, and you can create sine waves. Another reason why earlier I said there weren't many sine waves on old synths is because it's kind of pointless. If you want one, you can get a triangle and set your filter nice and low, and then you have a sine wave. So this is, yeah, so did I mention that this is slope control? It might be called slope. You don't find it too often. You might find it as a setting, 12, 6, 24. So let's have a listen to this. All right, there's our sound. Dialing down, we're losing. We've lost the high frequencies, and we get left only with, we're not going to get to the point where we only get a sine wave. Turn them up as loud as we can, see if we can see it on the scope. Amplify the scope. It's modulating, but you can see it's purer. Dial it back up. Turn the volume down. Obviously, cutoff affects your overall volume as well, so you need to be careful of that. So that's a low pass filter. You click this, here's a band pass, so you will only hear a narrow band in the middle. So a band pass filter, let's do that in blue, will cut off your fundamental, and it will just allow you to have this band in the middle. I'll mute. It's really thin sounding up high as we go through the harmonics. Start to find a fundamental down here somewhere. And then a high pass filter does the opposite, cuts out the bottom. So I'll sweep this the other way. So we'll start with our full sound again, and then sweep up from the bottom. Taking the fundamental out about now, we just end up with this thin harmonic noise at the top, just sort of a bunch of harmonics, beginning to lose the sense of pitch up here as well, just noise. Because it's these first few harmonics and the fundamental that define the pitch that you're hearing. So that's a filter. We've created, in step one, we've created our harmonically rich sound by blending a couple of oscillators together, and now we're removing the sound and sort of customizing it using our filter. three controls you need to know about on the filter: cutoff, resonance, and then I'm going to call it slope, where you get to choose the amount of roll off. This filter didn't have slope controls. For most manufacturers, the slope is the sound of the instrument, or is a very important sound of the instrument, so you don't often actually get to control it. But on software, yeah, you do, and you'll see it written as in shortcode. You see it written as LP6, which is a low pass filter with 6 decibels per octave, LP12 or HP48 if you've got something really extreme, high pass filter at 48 decibels per octave. You also might see it written as poles, which is one pole is roughly equal to is 6 decibels per octave. So you might see a 2-pole filter, and that is 12 decibels per octave. Or you could see a 3-pole filter, which is, I don't know, do your maths, 18 decibels per octave. Kind of, you see that less often, but be aware of it. You might see it. In fact, I know that one of the Cubase synths, I can't remember its name now, Prologue, it actually represents these with these little logos with little lines underneath to tell you the poles. So you'll see, if they're the same, imagine they're the same color. On Cubase, it represents it like that. That is a 3-pole low pass filter. Just that one synth, but I've seen it, and it, you know, makes sense. It's quite a cool way of showing it out. So now we have our sound. Let's change our drawing back to green. The last step is one that's been pretty invisible up to now, but I feel like it's important to mention at this point that you find a little built-in amplifier here. You won't notice it. It's going to have one dial. It's going to be volume. Circle. Yeah. All right. That's all that matters. It's got one dial, and that just sets the volume of the output of the sound. I mention it because it's important when we start talking about what we've not got on this picture, and something called modulation. So I hope you've been tracking so far. This is the fundamental setup on any subtractive synthesizer. You have an oscillator, or several. You have a filter. Yeah, sometimes two. Sometimes you can have a high pass and low pass separate dedicated filters that work in series. And then a little amplifier to set your level. And then out here we get to a speaker, which puts the sound into your world or into your headphones like I have. This is great and all, but it's not very interesting. And as you've been hearing, it only makes one constant tone. I can change this on my keyboard, but even that, oh, mute it, even me changing the pitch on the keyboard is technically a modulation. And modulation is where we really start to sort of make things a bit more complicated and a bit more musical. So the first modulation that we've just hit on, you're going to have a keyboard input into the oscillator, which I've got hooked up here. If you've been seeing me connect these up, these are just saying, hey oscillator, I want you to play at this pitch, and the keyboard has its sort of it knows that what is it, concert A is 440 hertz, or then the A above will be 880 hertz. Each octave is a doubling in frequency, but it still makes a constant drone sound. It's not responding to I'm not holding the key down. It's it won't stop. In fact, it's even now when I mute it, it's not stopping. It's still generating a tone. I'm just muting it so I don't have to listen to it. We need modulators to control this. And the first modulator, and the most important one, the one that you're absolutely going to find, is an envelope plugged into the amplifier. Why I insisted on drawing the amplifier. So on most synths you will find a couple of envelopes. Make that pinky red that I've been talking about. And at first we're going to talk about how envelopes work with amplifiers. Make this the red. Yeah, great. Envelope into amplifier. Perfect. And oh, it's gone right through my oscillator. Thanks, auto line. I'll go down like that. That works better. Perfect. What an envelope does is it runs through a cycle of signals every time a key is pressed. And it does it once per key press. Let's find an envelope. Going to be one down here somewhere. There we are. Okay. And what I need, because I've not actually set up on this synth, is that amp I was talking about. And there's an amplifier. So let's take that into there. So that's an amplifier. As I said, one dial level. I'm going to put my envelope down there. I'm going to scroll it a bit. Okay. I need to connect the gate. The gate is the just there. Note's been pressed. Alert that a keyboard will send. Don't worry about too much exactly what I'm doing right now. It doesn't matter too much. So, an envelope. The most common type of envelope you get is called an ADSR envelope, which stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. So you need to know what each of those four things do. So attack is the length of time, and it's a dial measured in milliseconds or time for the envelope to go from silence, 0, to the loudest it can be, which we represent with a 1 normally, when the key is pressed. So I'll try and represent that. If I put in a bit of attack, what have I got? I've got it muted. There we go. You hear with the slow attack, it took a while when I pressed the key for the sound to come in. I can make that more pronounced. Here we go, 1.19 seconds. And you can actually see it represented graphically here with that dial going around. And it happens when I press the key, and we call that the attack time. I've drawn the whole thing. An ADSR is frequently represented not like that, that's useless, like that. Okay, so that is your A time. You have a dial. Let's zoom in a bit. We'll have a dial. A. Then there is the decay time. So like attack, it's a dial set in time, and it's the length of time the sound goes from maximum volume, where it's at after the attack, to the volume set by sustain. I guess talking about sustain would have been good, but let's hear that. So I've now got an attack time of just under a second, and a decay time of about the same. We should hear it with volume up, volume down, and then settle. Perfect. And where it settles is known as the sustain time. Now, sustain time is a little sustain is a little different because it's not time. Sustain is measured in decibels or something. Sustain. Let's have a look. This one seems to be in percent, but doesn't matter if it's in percent of maximum or decibels, it's roughly the same thing. And it is the level at which the note will stay at until you let go of the key. So once the key's been held down, it actually works like a volume dial. And that needs to work in combination with decay to get the sound you want. So you can have, so if you have no sustain, for instance, and a bit of decay, you'll end up with a sound that just goes down to silence. And you can create percussive sounds like that. It sounds like just slope to nothing. And then finally, the last thing you need to know about is, oh, do I kind of squeeze it in? Oh, why has that not done it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Release, which is the length of time to go from sustain level to silence once the key's been released. Let's hear that. Let's dial up a bit of release. There it goes. Let's put a second on. So this envelope here, when it's plugged into the amplifier, we call it the amplitude envelope, the amp envelope. And you'll find a dedicated amp envelope on most synths. Let's bring up this one again. They call it loudness contour here. Again, that's a hark back to the olden days when I hadn't quite all settled on the terminology. And notice there's no release on this. It's an ADS envelope. You do get different types of envelopes. They're not all ADSRs. You get ARs, where it's kind of the sustain is always at a maximum. You get ADSs, which is what we've got here, which will sometimes have a switch that allows the decay time to act like sustain. We have, where are we? You can sometimes find H's, which stands for hold. So I've seen AHDSR, so it gets attack and then it stays as loud as it can for the H time, and then decay, sustain. You can kind of get all sorts, but ADSR is the main one. And you'll find a dedicated one on most synths just for amplitude, because you can use ADSRs to control other things. So if I get myself a second ADSR, you could plug in this envelope into, in pink, let's say, filter cutoff, which is a classic use. Or you can put it into pitch and it'll go whew, as you press a key, it will pitch up, it will decay, and it will sustain, hopefully at the note you want it to play at, and then pitch down as you release the key. It doesn't make particularly musical sounds, difficult to control in composition, but kind of cool in sound effects and things like that. But envelope into filter is extremely musical. So I'm going to get myself a second envelope. I'm just going to plug it into the gate just to make it start working, and then I'm going to put the output into my filter mod. Okay, don't worry too much about this section, but I can now have a different time. So let's set sustain and decay. So I'll just create a kind of regular sounding note to start straight away. I can now set this to be different, so the filter will open more slowly. So it'll go wow, or the other way, low sustain. And that way I'll get a more muted filtered throughout the note, but still get that percussiveness. And you see how it works the exact same way. It's opening and closing the filter whilst I'm on the sustain period. Slow ones kind of be a bit wobbly. So you'll nearly always find another dedicated filter for especially on the older style synths, another dedicated envelope for filter, or an envelope that you're free to sort of plug in anywhere you like. Sometimes called a mod envelope for modulation envelope. Or on computers now, there's almost no limit. I've seen Native Instruments Massive, which has 4 or 5 envelopes. You can just create as many ADSRs or HDSRs as you want and plug them into anything. And you can plug them into anything. You can plug the envelope into pulse width. In fact, let's do that. Let's plug this envelope into, I don't know, make them square waves, into pulse width. Let's take it out of there, shall we? And what I'm controlling here on a Select A is kind of an amount dial. You nearly always, every time there's a connection, you'll find an amount dial, and that's how much, it's sometimes called depth, it does. So there you can see the filter, not really hearing it, needs to be more open, I think. You can hear the pulse width quickly go from one place up to the top and back down to the bottom. Create a cool phasey sound. Just about to see it on the scope as well. Right. So that's the first modulator you need to know. You need to know envelopes, you need to know ADSR, and you need to know common uses for plugging them into, which I would suggest is definitely always the amp and very commonly into the filter. Next modulator, and possibly the final one you actually need to know about, is LFO. You might have heard that term before. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. And unlike the envelope, it's constantly running. I mean, you can set it so it restarts every time you press a key, but it runs in the background all of the time, and it spins forever. Unlike an envelope, which when you press a key, it happens once and that's it. An LFO, you press a key, it will spin forever. You hold that key down forever, it will do its thing forever. And it is an oscillator. It's an oscillator usually working at a frequency we can't hear below our hearing, which is roughly 20 Hertz or lower. But you find the same controls. You'll find, let's find an LFO. There we go. Let's have a look. You'll find the shape of the LFO that you want to choose. Same shapes we know. Sine, triangle, saw, reverse saw, square. That will be random. I never mentioned the white noise wave shapes. You'll sometimes find white noise as a choice on oscillators. You should be aware of that. That just makes noise. It doesn't matter what pitch you play. You'll find a rate, how fast you're spinning. This is currently set to be synced with my clock, so that's kind of in tempo eighths, 7 times in a bar, 5 times in a bar, or it can be, as represented down there, just sort of a how many hertz. So what this will do, for instance, let's plug it into, I'll take away the, not that one, I need that one. Let's plug it into our amplitude, and it will create a kind of a tremolo effect. Need to go the other way. And you see it's square. Let's go this way for clarity. Saw, reverse saw, triangle, sine, kind of sound the same, but they are slightly different, and square, on and off. So that's LFO into our amplifier. If it went like that, oh, it didn't do an arrow for me. How rude of it. Let's try that again. I want to do that. But again, more commonly, you're going to find LFO plugged into your filter. Let's go onto our filter, and I can see it's already affecting the filter. I'm going to stick it on triangle, and it creates our filter. I've just realized right now that I did not talk about resonance in the filter, so I'm going to have to go back, maybe edit this in, because that's a big oversight. But this here creates this wobbly sort of bass sound. It's a bit nicer than plugging that into give it a bit of level, because I know I'm being a bit quietly at the moment. Dial in some resonance, which I can't believe I didn't talk about. And we hear the LFO, triangle, sine, choppy kind of saw wave, really wobbly reverse saw, and steps. Of course, it's not impossible to plug this into other things, so pulse width or even pitch. And an LFO, a nice fast LFO into pitch, if I stop this being silly. Like subtly. Let's take it off here as well. Even more subtle than that, and faster. Okay, so it's not a great sound, but it creates like a constantly evolving harmonic pattern. That makes great like lead sounds normally. Yeah, you can hear what I was trying there. So on LFO, you find the same controls as you find on. Oh, that should have dragged. On most oscillators, except you'll normally find a sync button as well, which will make sure that it's spinning at the same time as your tempo. So that's shape, you know, waves, square. You'll find instead of, you know, you might find frequency, but it's sometimes called rate. It'll be called rate more commonly if it's synced to your host, and frequency if it's free to be any frequency at once. You find shape, and you might find a mount on here as well, but you imagine every time you get a red connecting arrow, there's also an amount dial that allows you to say how much you want. So if you just want this to wobble a tiny amount, you just move that a tiny bit. If you want it to wobble huge amounts, you can spin it all the way to the top. So with the exception of resonance, which I'm going to go back and do now, that is subtractive synthesis. It looks quite complicated now I've plugged it all together, but hopefully by presenting it in a step-by-step, you have been able to follow that. So now resonance. Resonance is a boost in frequency right on the cutoff point. So if I clear out some of the mess here, and we just keep our low pass filter. As you dial up resonance, you will, you also create a volume boost at the point of cutoff. Let me get rid of this completely. So instead of being a long and flat, if you look down here, this is hinting at the resonance by boosting up before it cuts. So we'll go along here, we'll have a cutoff point with a boost, and then the cutoff starts. And what this does is increases the volume of the harmonics underneath it. A little bit that one, this one a little bit. Let's say there's a harmonic here, and it boosts that up to the point where it can even be louder than the fundamental. And at that point you can change the sound of the pitch, and that's normally resonance all the way up to the top, all the way up to 100. You might hear it really resonate. You can hear the frequencies picking out as it goes up and down. This filter resonance doesn't go all the way to what we say is self-oscillating. It creates its own frequency by boosting one of these fundamentals to be much louder than the boosting one of these harmonics to be louder than the fundamental. But you can hear it makes like a wet sound, and it makes the filter more pronounced. Let's just dial that resonance on and off. It amplifies and accentuates some harmonics, and you get resonance on all filter types. Here it is on bandpass. It just makes the bandpass kind of more obvious, and high pass. So yeah, I embarrassingly forgot to mention that. But it's also, you know, something else you can modulate. You can bring resonance on using envelopes after you press a note. So a sound, which is quite good for pads, becomes more resonant over the course of the note. So the final thing I think I should just mention is that on software synth, we can consider MIDI control and velocity especially to be like a modulator. So we can make the filter open more when we press the keys harder, which kind of mimics how we hear like guitars and pianos. Even in real life, we'll hear the filter opening up. Not a filter, we'll hear a brighter sound when you play it harder. Obvious one is velocity and amplifier, so you actually get a louder sound when you play harder. And although I don't, yeah, it is mentioned in the spec aftertouch, which is which is like a something you can do once you press a key. You can press it harder. This synth doesn't have aftertouch. Press it harder to change something, and you can plug that into filter, pitch, LFO rate. Because the main reasons why this gets really complicated is that, excuse me, you actually end up with modulators modulating modulators. We can control LFO rate, not with a green arrow we can't. We can control LFO rate using an envelope. So we can make the LFO go wah, 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 you know, it gets faster and slower using an envelope. We can control LFO rate using velocity. We can control attack time. Go all the way into that. You can control attack time, that was meant to go all the way to the A, using velocity. So hard notes start faster. That would be a negative control normally, so the harder you play, the shorter the attack time. It can get endlessly complicated, but you don't need to necessarily know these extra layers of modulation. You do need to be able to, for your A-level music technology course, identify the four main wave shapes by ear, or at least have a good guess at them, understand filters, cutoff and resonance, understand envelopes, A, D, S and R, understand LFOs in terms of wave shape and frequency, and also a sync dial. I did mention sync, so sync is when you press a key and the note will, and the wave shape will start again. So that keeps it, which is quite cool if you're using squares and what did I have that plugged into? Let's say I plug that back into into there. It always starts at the same place, so you don't have to be perfectly tempo synced with it. I think we're there. I think that is subtractive synthesis. Again, with all of these things, the best thing you can do is go find a synth and play with it. I don't recommend trying to make modular synths work, but if you're on Cubase, load up Prolog. All of these things are there. Oscillators, filters, they're all there for you to sort of learn how to plug together and see how on most synths, these are plugged in for you. Here are two LFOs that are plugged in to this filter via this amount dial. There's no cabling to be done, it's just there. And if you have the amount at 0, it's not doing anything. Same here. Here are two envelopes. This one starts with a delay. You know, it's a DADSR, where the delay just waits before the ADR starts. ADSR starts. And there's amount dials here to control how much envelope 1 is affecting the filter. Yeah, it gets... I can understand why people go, what is this? But it's all there in terms of oscillators, filters, envelopes, LFOs, and here's just like some mod stuff in the middle that helps you control those things together. So I hope that helps. I hope that you followed me. As always, I've written this all out in the guide, and the best thing you can do is to spend some time away from coursework actually playing and learning. So when it comes down to those clocked coursework hours or the time pressured exam hours, you're not doing that then.